Howdy, and welcome to LeeReads, where I talk about the books I've been reading and enjoying lately. I love a good anticipated releases video, so that's what this video is going to be today. I'm going to talk about the books that are on my radar for the next 5 or 6 months or so. Some of these I have e-arcs for, thankfully. Some of these I've pre-ordered, and others I'm curious about and I hope to pick up once they come out. But let's get started beginning with January. I actually have an e-arc for this release. It is To Ride a Rising Storm, which is the sequel to Shape a Dragon's Breath, which came out about a year ago. To Shape a Dragon's Breath was one that I made its own video for because I really couldn't stop thinking about it. I thought that the world building and the way that the magic worked with the dragons was so inventive. It's set in an alternative Earth, really focusing on the New England area where there are lots of indigenous people with their own beliefs and way of life. And of course, there are people who have colonized that area and started taking control. To Shape a Dragon's Breath follows a young woman who finds a dragon egg, and once it hatches, it bonds with her, and it turns out to be a species that is very rare and is venerated by her people. But in order for her to learn to use its magic and to appease the regional political governing factions, she and her dragon must go to this boarding school, not only so she can learn to control its magic, to shape its breath, but also those who have settled the area insist that she cannot be trusted to raise this dragon if she doesn't attend to their school. And of course, there are other rising political conflicts that ensue, and this is the next book in that series. If you would like my more in-depth thoughts about it, I will link the book review I did last year. Another book that I'm intrigued by, coming out at the end of January, but I don't know too much about, is The Poet Empress. It looks like it's Chinese mythology inspired, potentially, where poetry is magic. This young woman comes from an impoverished village. Her family has been dying. They've been starving. She presents herself to the palace, willing to be in service to the imperial family, and winds up as a concubine to the prince. But in this world, poetry is magic, and she secretly must learn to read to help free her people. And I'm very intrigued by that concept. Next, in February, on the cozier side, is Agnes Aubert's Mythical Cat Shelter. I have an e-arc for this. This is by Heather Fawcett, who wrote Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies. The story is set in 1920s in Montreal, and Agnes is a type A personality who runs this cat shelter. And when things start getting tight for the business, she has to work with the landlord, who is somewhat of a legendary dark sorcerer, in order to keep things going. But when someone comes and threatens him, they must work together to not only solve his problem, but keep her cat shelter afloat. And even though I think it's cunning dark magic, I am hoping this is going to be somewhat cozy vibes. We'll see. Then we have Operation Bounce House by Matthew Dinniman, who is the author of Dungeon Crawler Carl. This is the beginning of a new series. Granted, I've only read book 1 in the Dungeon Crawler Carl series, so I want to be continuing that. The premise of this one seems similar but different, where the main character moves with his family to Earth's first colony, and they start to make a new life there. But when there's an alien threat, they get embroiled in some sort of game show aspect of it. I am waiting to see what people think about this one. Moving on to March, I currently have 4 books on my list. Most of them are sequels though. There's Steel Gods by Richard Swan, which is the sequel to Grave Empire, which is somewhat of a sequel to the Empire of the Wolf trilogy. I loved that trilogy and I really did enjoy Grave Empire. If you're a fan of Richard Swan, I'm sure you probably already have this date on your radar, but I would implore you, if you haven't read any of Richard Swan, please start with the Empire of the Wolf trilogy. I think it gives you all of the context you need to further enjoy and understand this newer trilogy. The Empire of the Wolf begins with the Justice of Kings. It's following this justice named Von Vault, but it's told through the eyes of his scribe, as at first they are trying to solve murders in this medieval inspired-esque world, that as the plot and the political intrigue goes deeper and deeper, there's this dark, almost death type of magic dealing with the afterlife that starts to pervade what's going on. And I really think you need to kind of have explore those events to see where we wind up in Grave Empire in this new trilogy and to understand a lot of the backstory about what's going on. I just really love Richard Swann's writing, the magic system that he's developed, the politics and what's going on. I'm really eager to read this next installment in this world. Next in March, we have a surprise sequel. I thought that the Children of Time trilogy was a trilogy, and I've rambled here about Children of Time by Adrian Tchaikovsky a lot. It is a book that I just shove at people if they have a remote interest in science fiction or biology. I think that each of the books in that series is so unique and strong, but you really have to trust the author to lead you to where it all connects, because it may not be apparent on the surface. Well, there's a fourth book coming out in that series. It's called Children of Strife, and that's all I need to know based on where Children of Time left off. I have so many ideas of where we could be going next, and it comes out in March. I do have an advanced copy of that as well. Another sequel is Blindside by Michael Mamet. The first book in the series starts with Planetside. It follows Colonel Carl Butler, who is retired from the army after some disastrous events occur. He's brought back to find the missing child of a high-profile person. What I found unique about this somewhat of an investigative story is the combination of the sci-fi and military elements and how the author weaves those together so well. I also just really enjoyed Carl. I think he has a great sense of humor, and the team that works around him, all of those relationships just feel so real, and I'm always going to read another Mike Mamet book. I really encourage you to try Planetside if you haven't already. A new release by Ilona Andrews, which is a married couple who write together under the same pen name, Ilona Andrews. It's called This Kingdom Will Not Kill Me. It's following a woman who is in love with this particular fantasy series, and they've been waiting forever and ever for the last book to come out, so she has reread the series over and over and over, knows lots of detail. You can see where I'm going. And winds up in that world. She's thrust into the events of the story and learns very quickly that she cannot be killed, but she can impact events. I've heard good early reviews already, and I'm very much looking forward to it. And I can trust this author to write a satisfying romance blended in with the cool fantasy world, because they've done it before. I actually don't have anything on the list for April, which is really surprising. So moving on to May, The Tapestry of Fate, which is the sequel to The Adventures of Amina al-Sarafi. In this book, a retired pirate is compelled to do one last job and gets the band back together, gets the crew back together for this last job. She doesn't really want to do it, but for the safety of her daughter, she feels she must. So the events of the first book are following kind of that job and that mission that she's set on, but the end of it really opens up the world, and now we're on a whole nother adventure, and so this is the next book in that story. Another book, and this is by a new author to me, but I know they are a popular author, R.J. Barker, I think that's the name. Mortadant's Peril. This follows a person who can speak with the dead very briefly after they pass. When their assistant or someone who works with them passes away, he hears their final words. He needs to solve their murder before it gets blamed on him. I love that kind of trope. That skill of being able to briefly speak with the dead after they pass reminded me of Empire of the Wolf. I think that's really cool. I like an investigation plot mixed in with my fantasy. I've never read from this author before, but I've heard good things about their writing, and I think this is going to be an excellent book to try them out. And of course, we have the next Murderbot novella, Platform Decay by Martha Wells. I have an e-arc of this one. I know I've been dying to pick it up, but I have other books ahead of it in line, so this is going to be the continuation of our Murderbot series. We love Murderbot on this channel. And the last book I'm going to mention today is we have a new Catherine Arden book coming out. Catherine Arden wrote the Winternight trilogy, which is excellent. She also wrote Between the Warm Hands of Ghosts, something like that, which was set in World War I with this kind of magical, mythical element to it. This new release, The Unicorn Hunter, seems very firmly back in like solid fantasy realm. Anne of Brittany was a child when her realm was invaded, her home besieged, and her royal father driven to his death. Now her treasury is empty, her land occupied by her enemies, and she is ordered, under threat of renewed war, to become queen of her conquerors and marry the King of France. Defiantly, she betroths herself in secret to France's greatest enemy, but in a world where courts may spy on each other by magic, there is only one way to solemnize this illicit union. Anne takes her court deep into a legendary forest where the court's diviner's skills cannot reach. All Anne wants is the secret wedding, which is her only hope of salvation. But when against all hope a unicorn appears and a stranger out of legend stumbles from the trees and falls at her feet, Anne is plunged into a world of enchantment, where a doomed sovereign might find the power to change her own and her country's destiny, or be lost in the shadows forever. I think that sounds really good. I want to read that, like, right now. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and as always, don't forget to support your local library. Thanks. Bye.